and I will introduce to you, I'm going to say it again, Nguyen Cavagnaro, who is a refugee from Vietnam, and she's going to share her story from being a refugee to a success story of becoming an American, and I'll have her tell you her story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Today is the 100th anniversary of Veterans Day in America, and I am truly honored to be a part of this event at one of our favorite towns, Ocean City. I stand here today before you wearing a traditional Vietnamese dress called an áo dài with the influence of the American flag. That's because I hope to give you a little bit of a different perspective on what Veterans Day means to someone like me. My name is Nguyen Cavagnaro, and over 43 years ago, I, along with the rest of my family of 5, escaped from Vietnam on April 30th, 1975, just hours before Saigon fell to the communists. Our escape story includes harrowing tales of bombs and explosions, newborns and toddlers in grave danger, and crushing family decisions on who gets to escape with us and try to survive, and who doesn't, and has to stay behind and most likely be killed. But the ending to that escape story has us standing here today as proud Americans because of the concerted efforts of many heroes in all shapes and sizes who helped us along every single step of the way, including my family, who made our survival their #1 priority. The hundreds of thousands of volunteers who welcomed us into the States, fed us, put clothes on our backs, and gave us tools to be able to survive and become productive members of society who give back to the community. And last, but most certainly not least, the Vietnam veterans, like many of you sitting out here in the audience today. All in the name of freedom, to protect us from the tyranny of the Communist Party. You helped keep the communists away from our neighborhoods in Vietnam. And then you made sure we had a safe passage to your own country after we lost ours. Sadly, unlike other veterans before you and after you, you weren't given the hero's welcome when you returned home. And you had to face your personal nightmares alone, publicly shamed by your own neighbors. It was appalling behavior that many civilians displayed then. But things have changed. About 2 years ago, I was thanking Vietnam vets for their service on Facebook when a Vietnam veteran saw that I was Vietnamese and replied to my grateful post to Vietnam vets by telling me he was sorry he didn't kill all my ancestors. That's right. He was only sorry for not having killed all my ancestors. Now, I learned only recently how truly convoluted and horrific the Vietnam War was. You basically had kids who got drafted and were forced to go to a foreign country to fight a war that wasn't clearly understood. They weren't even armed properly, either physically with appropriate weapons or mentally with clear communication and goals. And then meanwhile, back home in America, the citizens were fed propaganda that made them believe these soldiers were only doing horrible things to women and children and no good at all in any other way, and therefore should only be spit on and called baby killers when they came back home. The Vietnamese people themselves, they were torn between wanting to rule themselves and not be ruled by a foreign entity, or succumbing to the false promises of a better future with the communist regime. With communist spies and martyrs planted everywhere in Vietnam, and your own fellow Americans disrespecting you just for following orders, how can anyone trust anyone after that? I realized that this man who only wished he had killed all my ancestors, he must have been in so much pain to have such a strong negative reaction like that to my thank you, and that he must have experienced unspeakable tragedies during this time. So instead of attacking this man back, or even not saying anything at all, I took a different approach. And I let him know how truly sorry I was for all the pain he may have gone through. I couldn't take it away, nor could I reverse time. But the Vietnamese people who did not want communism to be their way of life are truly grateful for all the sacrifices that Americans like him, and like all of you, have done for people like me and my family to be productive and assimilated members of American society. It was from this negative interaction I had with a Vietnam vet that has driven me to let as many Vietnam vets as I can come into contact with know that we are deeply grateful for everything that they've done for us, so that they may try to heal from any pain this other man was obviously still imprisoned by. To that point, I started 2 projects in the town of Barnegat, where my husband Jimmy, sitting right in the front over there, where he and I currently live. One project is a recurring series of thank you events, where we try to find and literally track down Vietnam veterans living in Barnegat and invite them to a night of free food and drinks, all on us. We had many challenges in finding who a Vietnam veteran was living in our town, but we didn't let that deter us, and we turned it into a grassroots movement where we relied on individuals to lead us to people that they knew were Vietnam vets living in Barnegat. And we keep these events on the smaller side each time to ensure we actually have meaningful conversations with everyone. It's not like, a carnival type of atmosphere. And we've hosted 2 of these so far, and they have been nothing short of huge successes. And here are 2 group photos from our past events where you can see just how great these occasions have been for everyone involved. So I think there's one photo over here of our first event, and then the second photo of our second event. Now, we don't plan on stopping until every Vietnam veteran in our town has been honored at one of our events, so it's still quite a long journey that my husband and I have ahead of us for this. The other project is a memorial my husband and I designed and had erected specifically for Vietnam veterans in our town. It is the first and currently only Vietnam Veterans Memorial in the country that has been fully funded by a Vietnamese refugee. That memorial was dedicated earlier this year on March 29th, on the very first National Vietnam Veterans Day. And we were literally blown away when we learned it received national coverage via USA Today and the Associated Press. We had more, thank you. We had more than 600 Vietnam veterans and their supporters show up from across the country to our tiny little town of Barnegat. And then they got pinned by the Exercise Tiger Foundation with official commemorative pins from the Department of Defense afterwards. And the amount of collaborative effort that went into making that ceremony as phenomenal as it was, it literally just brings me to tears when I think about all that everyone did to bring this community of people and the veterans that they love and honor together. Here is a photo of our monument. On the blackest polished granite that comes to a peak, you have 3 flags at the top: the American flag, the South Vietnamese flag, and the POW MIA flag in between them. Underneath, in very large letters, is the main message of this monument: welcome home, Vietnam veterans. We're still working on our local goal of reaching every Vietnam veteran in Barnegat to have them come to one of our thank you events, but on a broader level, we would love to have other towns and states get inspired by this and to do the same for their own Vietnam veterans in their own communities. And in fact, As a result of the national coverage from a monument dedication ceremony, 2 Vietnamese brothers living in Michigan have already contacted us to tell us how our actions have inspired them to also build a similar monument in their own town and have requested permission to use our design for theirs. So we are so ecstatic that our national goal is starting to take root of communities across the nation welcoming home Vietnam veterans. The reality is, not everyone was able to come home after that war, or the wars before it and after it. But for at least one day a year in America, we gather as a unified community to honor those who put on that uniform, who defend our freedoms that don't come free, and do so with fierce love for our country. I lost my country in 1975, but I gained an amazing one in its place, and it's all due to our heroes, our veterans. Thank you.